Time for Retraction. I'm your co-host, Antoine.
I'm Jamie, and we are reversing course through discourse. A friendly reminder that Retraction Media on YouTube has uploads every week. Please subscribe, like, share, and leave a comment on our videos. And don't forget to hit the bell icon to stay up to date on our latest content. Follow us on Twitter at Retraction Media and subscribe on Apple, Spotify, Google, Amazon, and more to listen to our full episodes.
Welcome to the podcast where, for once, we're not that upset with a corporation. And by we, I mean myself.
Not that upset, huh?
I'm not. For the first time, I'm actually happy with a corporation.
Wow.
Do you want to know more?
I do want to know more.
Okay. Now, they're not sponsoring us, but I am so ecstatic with what just occurred that I had to give a big shout out. DBrand.
Never heard of it.
DBrand is a company that does skins for like they do skins for the Steam Deck. They do skins for controllers, I think, maybe a couple other things. And then they also do like the PlayStation 5 when it first came out had just a white outer casing. And it was clear that Sony at some point wanted to develop customizable casings that you could switch out in order to basically spruce up the look of your PlayStation 5. But either because of the pandemic or what have you, it took like a year, like 2 years or so before they even came to market with it. Now they have them in market, but immediately after the PlayStation 5 came out, this company DBrand challenged Sony to sue them. So they were always a little bit in the controversy. They said, you could sue us, but we've come out with replaceable plates for your PlayStation 5. Good luck. Come after us, Sony, if you want to, but they're available. So I bought them, and they're fantastic. So my PlayStation it went from white
like clip over it.
Yep, to clip over it. Yeah. So it went from white to a sleek black. Never been happier. Eventually, Sony did sue them. So they don't make those plates anymore. So I have plates that you cannot actually get anymore, but they were amazing. They great quality, fantastic. I had nothing to complain about. You just can't buy them. Flash forward, last year I was on the waiting list for a Steam Deck. Got delivered a Steam Deck.
What is a Steam Deck? I have no idea.
It's a handheld PC that runs on Linux, created by Valve.
So I don't know what any of that means. Your description of this Steam Deck.
Like I said, it's a handheld PC. Think of the Nintendo Switch.
Like a Game Boy? Like a Game Boy? Yeah,
like a Game Boy. Sure.
That's go all you have to say. It's a Game Boy.
It's a Game Boy that is 25 times more powerful than the Game Boy ever could have been. So yeah. So let's just put it that way.
I mean, it's not Game Boy in color though, right? Game Boy Color.
It's in color. But it's better than a Game Boy. So how about that? It could do more than 2D sprites. Anyway, it's a great device, but when it landed on the market, again, because of the pandemic, there weren't many manufacturers that were creating a case for it. And I love a good case. So enter DBrand, who said, hey, we're right off the heels of being sued for building a case for the PlayStation 5. We're going to build a case for the Steam Deck. Valve is a little less, vindictive than Sony is, because they're never going to create a case for them. So they have something, but it's not to the quality of what a third party might do for their device. So they're not going to come after DBrand. But lo and behold, they built this case. I get on the waiting list for the case. It comes around Christmas. So I was on the waiting list maybe for like 6 months or so. Case is fantastic. Put it on. DBrand sends out a big sort of like an oopsie. They say that the back of the case, there is a magnetic stand. And the magnetic stand affects the fan within the Steam Deck, making it basically not run as well as it should be running. Not every Steam Deck. Basically sub Steam Decks that they originally tested it on, the manufacturer of that fan, it did not have any kind of magnetic interference, but a few Steam Decks that have a different manufactured fan do. Now, they didn't want everyone to have to open up their Steam Deck to find out if their fan is one that might be affected by magnetism. And so they said, we're going to make good on it, and we're going to send everybody brand new cases with a new developed magnetic kickstand. Now, I just said, all right. I mean, you've heard this before. Okay. I was like, I didn't put anything into it. I was just like, I just took off the magnetic stand because it can be taken off. And I just used the case, and I said, you know what, whatever. Sure. Maybe they'll send people. I mean, I didn't believe it. for a second. I actually didn't believe. I didn't believe they were going to do it because I was like, "How are you do this? How are you going to? You're not even going to ask me for these cases back. You're just going to send me a brand new case."
If to like register your product for that to even happen, how do they know who you are?
I didn't do anything. I didn't register anything.
Did you buy it from their website?
I bought it from their website. So
okay, so they have that.
So they have my information. Yeah. So anyway, last week, UPS package comes. Open it up, and I'm like, "Holy crap! It's a whole new case. It's a whole new case with a new kickstand for free." They just sent the whole thing again. Good packaging, everything. Wholly for free. I was like, wow. Can you believe it? A corporation that acknowledged that they did something wrong, said it's on us and we're going to fix it. And then they made good by the customer without the customer having to do anything. I didn't have to go in and do like, what is that request for proposal? Like, I didn't have to like sign up for anything. Nope. Yeah. I didn't have to fill out a form. I didn't have to send back the old case. They just dropped the new case off at my door. In this day and age, I just thought that was worthy of like, what? Are you serious? What kind of company does this? Who is in charge of this company? I want to shake the hand of the guy who runs DBrand. I'm just going to put it right out there. So
it's the letter D brand.
That's correct. It is D as in dog brand.
Is that supposed to mean the brand, or is D stand for something?
I don't know.
Oh, okay. I was curious.
Anyway, look,
that is fantastic. That is really cool. Usually when there's a product recall, you have to, type in your product number, and see if you
prove when you bought it, things like that.
Fill out a form, register your product.
You
have to do all this stuff. Yeah. And they just did it. Now,
and sometimes you have to pay for the shipping.
That there's an enormous markup on this product where they're still like afloat and they were able to do this.
Maybe. Probably.
Which is that, hey, who cares?
Doesn't matter.
That doesn't matter, right?
Because they weren't initiating that they would need to recall anything. So they were counting that profitability, whether it's a 200% markup, 600% markup. They were still, that was in their books. They were saying this is the money we're going to make on every sale. That this ate into it because they've sent brand new cases out free of charge. I was just like, wow, that's pretty cool.
Good for you, DBrand. You got a loyal customer out of it.
Hey, in this doom and gloom, with what corporations are doing today, I felt like we should be the light.
Decency sets you apart.
In the darkness, there is a light, and it was DBrand. Now they may have laid off half their workforce as a result of sending me this new deck, this new case. But in light of I haven't heard anything about that, I'm hoping that wasn't the case, and I got a new case without it being on the back of somebody's mortgage. So I'm hoping that's what occurred here. I don't, as of right now, I have not heard of this company laying off people.
That is great. I mean, it's sad that doing the right things does set you apart from your competition.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
It shouldn't be extraordinary. I mean, it in itself, making things right, it should not be extraordinary, but it is. So
DBrand, you are an extraordinary company.
What was the line from Waiting, the movie? The difference between extraordinary and ordinary is that little extra.
No, that's a good line. I don't know any quotes from that movie. So
I saw it a long time ago. Yeah. All right, cool. Anything else?
I've said enough. I've said enough. I've praised DBrand. I've got into it. The floor is yours, sir.
I will go. I have a space topic, but it starts with an Elon alert.
Of course.
All right. It's not all about him, but next month, SpaceX will launch its Super Heavy booster rocket, which is the largest launch system in history. More than double the power of NASA's Space Launch System that lifted off in November. NASA plans to use SpaceX for its Artemis 3 mission, which will bring astronauts to the moon for the first time in 50 years. This is also, and we've covered this before on the pod, this is also the Starship that Musk plans to use to colonize Mars by 2050, where he wants like 1 million people living there in a permanent civilization. SpaceX is also planning the first ever civilian trip to the moon using the Starship on a mission financed by a Japanese billionaire. And we've talked about this type of topic at length on past episodes, but I decided to do a little bit more research on properly funding NASA. And the risk that we've talked about before that I won't go too deep into, but we can riff on it a little if you want, is that private companies will develop capabilities using taxpayer funds. Eventually, the company, like SpaceX, will outperform the enabling government agency, in this case, NASA, and then wind up selling back the tech or service to the public that already paid for it once, right? These are points that you have made pretty clearly before, Antoine.
With the markup. They
There
don't
you
sell
go,
it
right?
back at cost. Because they'll go back and say, we have to create profitability. Otherwise, how can we be a company? Like what kind of capitalism is that? We have to make a profit.
They have ethics, Antoine.
Right,
they
exactly.
Business ethics.
It's the right thing to do. We have to sell it at cost. Otherwise, how do we pay all the people that you taxpayers helped us bring on board? Right? It makes sense to me.
So once the private company surpasses the government's capability to operate in something like outer space, it will be near impossible to ever regain that control, right? Once it's out, it's out. And you've brought up the example of like the colonies, right? Once the business interests decided to go against the king, I mean,
yeah, that was it.
It was really difficult to get back control. In fact, they did not. So the problem with that is that people have much less say in the operations of a corporation than they do in government. For as little say or voice as you think you may have in government, you have even less in a corporation. I mean, I don't think there's any other way to put that.
In space, no one can hear you vote.
There you go. Customer service can't hear you in space. So if the corporation controls something vital to society, the people will experience hardship. I think that's kind of the equation. And you've gone out of your way to drive that one home in previous episodes. So the solution is to properly fund the government agency responsible for this function, which in outer space is NASA. It doesn't mean that SpaceX can't exist. It just won't be running the show. It will be a tool for NASA to contract, just like NASA contracts a lot of other things today. So some facts about NASA. NASA is actually more than just a space agency, right? It surveys the sky for dangerous asteroids and researches various scientific disciplines like planetary science, heliophysics, astronomy, astrophysics, biology, physics, and earth science. And that includes climate and weather that enables informed decision-making about agriculture, water and food security, urban planning, and disaster preparedness and response. And this is important because when you think about NASA's budget versus the revenue of a company like SpaceX, NASA's mandate is broad. So you see NASA's budget and you're like, well, they have more than maybe SpaceX or other companies are making yet, but they're not as specialized. And because their mandate is so broad, without proper funding, they're actually spread really, really thin. You're only like in the millions with a lot of things that are being funded, which means they can't compete with the individual companies that are specializing in these areas. So NASA's budget in 2019 was around $21 billion, but it generates over $64 billion, which means it's a profitable agency. NASA also supports over 300,000 jobs. In 2022, NASA's budget was $24 billion, which is less than 0.5% of government spending, 0.48%. In 1969, NASA spent the equivalent of $33 billion today to reach the moon. And while tech has improved, and you might think, hey, NASA could do it for less now, NASA's activities and responsibilities have grown as well, because with that tech improving, so have our capabilities, and so have all the possibilities, and so have all the competition in the private sector. So simply getting to the moon isn't enough. You can't just say, well, we can get to the moon cheaper because that was the goal. It's not about that. It's all right, what do you do once you get there? And what are other things can you do? And like I said, they have a broad remit now. The issue is people don't understand the socioeconomic benefits of spaceflight. And that's kind of what I want to cover now. And the easiest way to raise awareness of what NASA can do for society is to really understand what NASA has already done for society. I mean, there's a list.
Okay.
And to make it memorable, I'm going to go through it fast.
Okay.
But here's the top 41
what
NASA spinoffs.
Okay. All right.
I think
your pen and pencil, everyone.
I think it's going to be good because you're going to be, some of you may know, and some of you may not, in terms of like, I use these things, but I think you're going to be impressed by just how much NASA has done for society.
Okay. All right. Reel it off.
Insulin pumps, cochlear implants for hearing impaired, water filters, air purifiers, formulate a nutrient additive found in baby formula, artificial limbs, a computer mouse, fire-resistant materials used in firefighter suits, ski boots, blood pumps, various aircraft and drone wing designs, cloud computing, portable computers, freeze-dried food, food safety, Invisalign, the thing for your teeth, improved solar cells, ear thermometers, GPS, LASIK, shock absorbers for buildings, better tires, better smoke detectors, life shears to cut through cars and buildings in emergencies, home insulation, wireless headphones, CAT scans, portable X-ray devices, X-ray imaging machines in general, design, and that came from designing X-ray or designing apparatuses for X-ray astronomy. Image sensors found in DSLR cameras, cell phones, medical imaging, and dental X-ray devices, memory foam, which were used as seat cushions to protect test pilots, scratch-resistant sunglasses that were used to protect astronauts' helmet visors, cordless vacuums. They partnered with Black & Decker so that they could have battery-operated tools for the moon exploration. AI personal trainers. Those were developed because pilots needed to be alerted when they're about to black out from the G-forces. Lighter, warmer outerwear that keeps astronauts comfortable in space. LED lighting, which serves a dual purpose of not only growing plants, but also suppresses melatonin production in humans, which promotes wakefulness. Better glow-in-the-dark technology, because emergency pathways were lit like that way on the International Space Station. Arguably the super soaker. The engineer came across that while he was doing stuff for NASA. Research into a novel method for detecting molecular damage in astronaut DNA could lead to new cancer tests. And NASA is now reviving a 50-year-old research that could deliver steady renewable energy in terms of big battery storage. So that's everything. And that isn't even the full list. I mean, I stopped at 41 and I was like, I don't want to bore anyone. But
oh, wow. I mean, that's quick. That's quick. I mean, there's a couple of, is this part of how NASA gets some of its revenue? Do they have a patent or any kind of royalty on any of the technology that they developed?
I don't know, actually. I got to be honest. I don't know. A lot of the stuff. So some of the things are net new, like they created. Mm-hmm. Some are enhancements on what already existed. Okay. And then some are just partnerships where they're contracting out someone to come up with something new. So it's not just like NASA's developing all this in a lab and it's solely them. A lot of times they're contracting it out, but they have a need, but they're funding that research and maybe a third party is doing it. Sometimes it is all them, or sometimes like I had mentioned things were better, improved. Like sometimes it's like, this is cool, but we need to be better to survive in space.
Yeah. I wish you did a more of a deep dive on the cloud computing, because I'm sort of like, that's everything. I mean, that's how Microsoft and Amazon make buttloads and goodles of money. I mean, it's all on the cloud. If you're saying NASA helped develop cloud computing, I kind of want to know where they are in terms of that. Do they? I mean, it could have been a contract. I don't know. And then everyone just took it. Here's the thing, though. Government is supposed to do this in a way. Government is supposed to fund research and come up with societal goods that people can either take, improve upon, and do what they will in order to, again, enhance our civilization. That this is the role of government. So NASA is playing the appropriate role. And then you have to say, well, how much money can someone then go on and make off of these taxpayer-funded initiatives? That's a question for another day. But NASA is doing the appropriate thing. This all makes sense. This is the way it's supposed to work.
And they're doing
it should know that
as an underfunded agency. I guess the point is, like, imagine what else they could do. Like, these are things out of necessity that they've created. And we have reaped the benefits. I mean, geez, think of GPS. Right. I mean, GPS alone has changed the world. Yeah. And so have a number of these other things for so many reasons. So it kind of blows my mind when you see all these things and there's spinoffs. It's like that whole thing, like, it's not the destination, it's the journey. I mean, these are all things that were not the purpose of the mission. When you get into the purposes of the mission to answer foundational and fundamental questions about ourselves, I mean, that's really cool. But these are just spinoffs. These are things. I mean, it's such a cool endeavor to say, we are going to fund an agency to colonize Mars, or to mine the solar system for resources, or to make sure that humans don't go extinct eventually, or whatever it may be, or to do all the other things that I had mentioned. There are earth sciences to make sure that, crops are taken care of, agriculture, and that whole list that I named before. I mean, you have all of those missions that are so important to survival. And then you have these added benefits that no one even expected that just pop up. It's like, how could we not overfund this agency, in my eyes. But
you make a good case for it. One could say it's not about the mission to the stars. It's about the friends you make along the way.
there you go. There you go. So it doesn't end there.
Oh, okay.
Now, there's also all the various companies that are supported. And I do want to make a point of that, because I'm not trying to say that SpaceX, Blue Origin, Boeing, Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, and all these other smaller companies that I didn't list that you probably never heard of, like, I'm not saying they don't exist. They all serve a purpose. They just shouldn't own the space. They shouldn't be dictating to us, and they shouldn't ever be put in a position where they can fly solo and, beyond our grasp, and they can, again, own something critical to humanity. I think that government should play probably the most prominent role in some of those spaces. And I
You're
think
saying they shouldn't have the ability to steal our future?
Yeah, something like that.
They took our jobs.
Steal our future is an interesting way of putting it. I would say probably lease our future back to us.
Oh, well, that's one way of doing it.
Yeah. So it's interesting. So we're talking about these companies. They do have a role to play, but you also have budget constraints that can limit NASA's ability to make those contracts. For instance, instead of funding 2 companies to develop the human landing system that they want to use on the moon, NASA, as NASA has always done, they always, for these big contracts, have 2 companies on board to do them after the bidding process. And that's basically to foster competition between them and to have a fail-safe in case for whatever reason one doesn't make it. But NASA this time around could only afford to do one. And so they had to pick SpaceX, and they couldn't go through the proper bidding process. Luckily, there was a huge lawsuit and lots of protests, mainly from Jeff Bezos. And I remember hearing it, and the way that it was covered, it seemed like they were just being almost sore losers. But then when I read more about it, I'm like, oh, wait, no, this is not the right way to do it. And it's because their funding got cut. But luckily, after all that stuff, Congress did increase their funding, and now NASA has opened up the bidding process to not just Blue Origin, but a number of other people to get that second contract. So that's good. But there's even more benefits to funding.
It's like my new yacht.
Yeah. Which bridge can I tear down to get my yacht through and then have to rebuild? Which is a callback to another previous episode that we did. Anyway, so one of the coolest parts about all of this, other than the tangible, is kind of this intangible aspect of NASA and our relationship with it. And that's that NASA inspires and is inspired in an endless cycle of human imagination brought to life. And I think Star Trek is a really good example of that. In the 1960s, Star Trek came out, and it actually gave this nation and our space program hope at a time when arguably we didn't really have a lot of it. And the idea that new life and civilizations might be out there fueled an entire generation to dream big. And since then, the 2 entities have been kind of intertwined. And there's so many examples of this. I'm going to name a few, and they're not even the most, I'm not even going to argue that they're the most important, because it's kind of subjective at this point. But you had the actress Nichelle Nichols, who played Lieutenant Uhura, who was the first African-American actor to play a major part on an American primetime series. NASA actually hired her to recruit more women and minorities to become astronauts in the 1970s, very successfully. Likewise, several astronauts and NASA engineers.
She was an ambassador. She was
like
space ambassador of some sort.
Exactly. And so you had also several astronauts and NASA engineers and NASA scientists all citing that Star Trek inspired them to be part of the space program. But more than that, which actually is leading to some really cool areas, is that, Star Trek's photon torpedoes have been reportedly plausible. 4 students calculated what you would need in order to build realistic photon torpedoes. And according to them, the science isn't actually that complicated. I'll bet it's, a little bit out of our reach at the moment. We don't have currently the technology, but the science is possible. And their findings are actually published in a peer-reviewed journal, Physics Special Topics. We even have quantum teleporting. Now, it's not the teleporting that you see, but it's about the inspiration to even go there. Right? It's the people that were inspired by Star Trek have now gone into real disciplines and are looking into it and making it happen. From there, you have games, movies, series, print media. They're all riffing off of one another to further fuel concepts that are always inspiring NASA, and news of NASA realizing them only fuels more creativity. And if you think of any sci-fi story, and then you see what NASA is considering to do today to explore our solar system. Like, it's just, this is why I wish I could live forever, because what we're going to do tomorrow is going to be really cool. We have swimming robots, these micro robots that can go in oceanic moons. We have crawling robots that can explore Martian caves. We have lightweight deployable structures that expand in space and allow us to just do our thing there. We have seeding asteroids with fungi to create space soil. I mean, it's all this cool stuff. I just can't imagine what we would actually do if this was funded in a way where it was prioritized. I mean, 24 billion, you spend like almost $1 trillion on defense. I mean, look at everything we got for our 24 billion, dude. Like, look at all of that. What do we do with? That's just so much potential. And it's so much squandered potential because of all the time we've already wasted from landing on the moon to now, and how much people care and the drop in enthusiasm. It's, I don't know. This is more of a PSA than maybe a topic, but I wanted to raise awareness because there's so much stuff that we all take for granted. It gives us our modern world. I mean, everything from glow in the dark lamps to your CAT scan. I mean, it's just so much is there. And no one could care less, you know, when we launch a helicopter on Mars or a new rover sends back an image. I don't know. So there's that.
Well, they're going to care when Elon blots out the sun.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or will we?
Yeah, I don't know. We might all be living underground by then.
Like, yeah, you never know. That's where he put us. Well, it's a good PSA. I mean, that's you. I think you've definitely hit that nail on the on the head. The only thing I can add is that I was thinking, I was like, Aurora was the first interracial kiss on television between her and Kirk, I believe. So.
That's right. Yeah.
That's all I have to add about it.
Oh, well,
that's
I'm glad you agree.
Well, I'm just gonna say that, yeah, part of that inspiration.
I mean, do you, out of all the government agencies, because you've pointed this out before, and when I actually looked into it, I was like appalled. A lot of agencies are created. I mean, you could be cynical and say to expand the power of the branch they report into beyond the remit that they were deemed. And the executive branch has been a great example of that. I mean, the amount of agencies that they've created to expand their reach and capabilities is alarming, to say the least.
Check out episode 24. We talk about that. But yeah,
you know the episode.
I do.
Oh wow, that's impressive. So there's that, but I also don't want to lump every government agency into this power grab bucket. So do you think that NASA is one of the more critical agencies, or do you think that if we were going to increase funding, that it should go to something else instead?
Not at all. NASA is the future. We know this. I mean, there's a lot to be explored, and we know this about the. What don't we know? There's a lot to be explored. Like, for instance, everyone talks about the oceans. You know, there's so much about them we don't yet know. So there's definitely that. But in terms of the one thing where me and Elon actually do agree is that any species that cannot get off of its own rock is probably not going to survive much longer in terms of species lifetime, not our own individual lifetime. You know, we're talking about just the life of the species itself. Anything can happen. It doesn't have to be something that we ourselves are in control of. Solar system, the universe could be a very dark and brooding mistress. Maybe a call back to our BDSM episode.
I mean,
it's covered in latex.
So
and
right. I mean, we're the latest on a list of renters on this planet.
Exactly. Well, there you go. Yeah, the history of the planet tells us that exact.
We have so many inhabitants, so many. I mean, just like a planet full. We've had planet full of different organisms that have been wiped clean.
Yeah.
And start anew, and we're just the latest. It's not like this planet was created for us. It's not like we're the first ones to inhabit it. So the idea that we can just sit here pretty until the sun explodes is a false choice. Something will happen before that will drive us off the rock.
Right.
Probably.
So
if we can't stop it from happening,
right?
If we don't have the tech.
Well, we shouldn't have to either. We should have the tech to simply vacate if necessary, depending on what's going on. So. I'm with him on that. We have to look to the stars. We have to get on board with figuring out space travel, colonizing, getting bases on the moon, Cloud City in Venus. If anyone's looked into that, that's a really cool theory. Cool. There's a couple of articles on that. Plenty of stuff out there that we should be that we should be getting a move on. How about that? We should be getting a move on because we've only been this active in this space for a short amount of time. We've been living in the mud for the majority of our histories. So now that we've got our ducks in a row before we nuclear annihilate one another, we should probably figure out how to climb to the stars. That's yeah. So I agree with that.
There you have it, folks. If you have a differing opinion or anything to add, or if I got something slightly wrong, let us know. Hit us up in the comment section on YouTube or we're on Twitter as well.
I will take Amtrak as a close second.
I mean, I thought you would go to infrastructure or like housing or something like that.
I'll go there too. But hey, there's plenty more space and
I would say education. I mean, education would be a big one for that's arguably more important. But it's again, I can't downplay education, so it's probably the only one I would put NASA second to. But just the sheer volume of societal improvements that they produce. It's not like it doesn't have to be like 100 a year. I mean, the things are just so monumental and monumental on the smallest and largest scale. I mean, if it's small, it infects everything. And if it's big, it can be life-saving. Right. It's just so, man, it's just such a cool, we're so lucky. We're so lucky to have an agency like NASA. Not every country does.
Yeah.
We're so lucky that they can set out to achieve something great and then in the process be creating spin-off technologies that in a couple of years we'll all be benefiting from. It's just, God, man, you couldn't dream up a better agency that would just produce for you.
Yeah.
I like science. So
you think
anyway.
you think that's a good one. I think I have a small PSA.
There you go.
I think we've mentioned this once before, but this just in. The Doomsday Clock is now closer than ever to midnight. Did you see it?
I did.
Did it come across?
My God, dude. So you want to know what my reaction to this was? I don't want to.
What? It's the Doomsday Clock.
How stupid is this clock?
It's not stupid at all. It's actually, you as a science person, you should be in love with this clock.
No, because I feel like you want to know what my problem is. So you correct me. You want to know what my problem about this is? Is it sooner or later it's going to hit midnight? I mean, it's going to be stupid. At some point, you are ratcheting up the time for all of these events. And the closer it gets to it, as long as the world doesn't end, you can't go to midnight. And so you can
go to midnight. But then if someone launches a nuclear weapon, you could just push the clock to midnight. It's not that bad.
That happens. But what I'm saying is that you're going to get so close to it where the clock would have moved, the hand of the clock would have moved so much in the past, but now that you can't go past this threshold, unless there is a nuclear holocaust, like you're gonna start discounting things. You're gonna start weighting it differently, and it becomes meaningless. The clock is meaningless. It'll never be accurate. I think that's my point. Is the accuracy of the stroke of midnight? It's not.
It's as accurate as the experts that convene to push the clock forward. They are scientists
of different ages, of different decades or whatever. Like what was moving it a certain amount of time in the past, I can't imagine can continue to be that way because the world is changing. The world is complicated.
There's one constant. I'll say that the clock started after the advent of nuclear weapons, so it is the clock exists in a nuclear age. That is its whole.
Is it the countdown to the use of a nuclear weapon? Is that what it is?
More or less, it's that. And
the world can end in so many other ways.
Well, it encompasses some climate change as well.
Or it could go off, or some country could use a tactical nuke, and unfortunately, the world doesn't really change that much, except for the people that it hits. Like, there's that too. Maybe. I mean, that's my thing. Is like I don't understand it. I feel like it's an oversimplification of the world's challenges. I just go with your story. Go with your story.
How can I go with my story now? It's an
because I want to hear.
There's no point now. There's no point talking about it.
I want to hear.
You basically shattered the ceiling. You've destroyed the aura and the beauty of the Doomsday Clock. There's no reason to talk about the
I want
Doomsday
to hear
Clock.
the Doomsday Clock. They added
I'm
100
not gonna talk
seconds.
about
It
the
went on
Doomsday Clock.
100
No.
seconds. I want to know why they added 100
No,
seconds.
it's over. You destroyed it. You spoiled it.
Well, do you agree or disagree with me?
You peed in the pool. Are you happy?
Do
You peed
you
in the
agree
pool.
with me?
I was going to err on the respect for the people that convened to talk about why the clock has moved. I was going to give.
Why did the clock move? I want to know. I didn't read. All I read was the headline, and I saw that they moved it 100 seconds, and I was like,
you know what? I'm going to wade into this piss pool. How about
God,
that? You pee in the pool, and I'm going to go in anyway.
I'll go in there with you.
Well, it's your urine.
It's my urine, so it's not as bad. Yeah.
So let's have it at that. This morning, the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientist reset the clock based on how close it believes the world is to disaster, with midnight symbolizing doomsday. The group takes into account factors ranging from nuclear weapons to climate change. We are living in a time of unprecedented danger, and the doomsday clock time reflects that reality, says Rachel Bronson, who oversees the bulletin, in a statement. 90 seconds to midnight is the closest the clock has ever been set to midnight, and it's a decision our experts do not take lightly. The clock's new position is due largely, but not exclusively, to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, which has increased the risk of nuclear escalation, says the bulletin, again in that same statement. The group also attributes its decision to various ongoing concerns, including the climate crisis and the breakdown of global norms and institutions needed to navigate advancing technologies and biological threats like COVID-19.
And I saw that when you see, because they did it, it's funny, the article I saw didn't have it in like is it analog clock? Is that what you call the clock? With
sure.
Yeah, right. Like with it was on like a line chart. And you just see that recently it's these little, in the past it was like these big ticks, and then recently it's been a lot of little tiny ticks.
Yeah, it's a little buildup. Anyway, that was in the Smithsonian. Smithsonian gave that.
But it feels very
Smithsonian magazine.
I just don't understand what, because they even see like, and maybe they got into more detail, but countdown towards disaster, climate change, or a nuke, like what?
It's a warning. It's a clock to warn us that
once
we
it
are
hits
in dangerous
midnight.
waters.
What is disaster?
Disaster is doomsday.
And what is that?
It's the day of doom.
And what happens?
Doom.
To who?
All of us on that day.
Oh, because that's important. Because that's different. Because
you thought it was like, just what? You thought it was counting down for one person?
Because none of those change happens in different degrees in different regions, and a nuke it's got proximity to it.
Yeah.
Now it can have reverberating effects in terms of markets and supply chains, but nothing is felt evenly.
You know what? I'm going to say this. I wish the doomsday clock, instead of calling it doomsday, because clearly that's about the marketing,
but it should have time zones. The doomsday clock should have time zones.
I was going to say that
it
should be an end of an era. That's really what because the odds that every human being on the planet dies when the clock hits midnight.
You see where I'm going with this, right?
That's what I'm saying. I think that's where I'm trying to help you out here. I'm trying to clean up some of this urine in the pool. I think what you're saying is that we're not all going to die on doomsday. This is true. It's just the end of it's like the end of our civilized period. Maybe another dark, it's the end of an age of light, and then entering into a dark age, which is kind of how I wish they did talk about it. Because I think that's what they're really going for. They're saying that this period, this light period that we've all enjoyed, this period of unprecedented peace, that ends. And we're probably
even that is subjective, though. I mean, I guess you're speaking about the wealthy nations. That's subjective.
Well, yeah. That you're right. That is
but that's my problem with this. It's like for a clock for who?
Yeah.
And if it's just for us, then let's just say it. I mean, is it our clock? Is it a US clock?
You're probably right. It probably is a clock of the global north. You're absolutely right about that. Yeah. Because it doesn't mean nuking a small country somewhere in the global south is probably not what doomsday refers to. So yeah, I mean, again, that's why the war in Ukraine I mean, there's many reasons the war in Ukraine is important, but it's like the first war on European soil in quite some time. So yeah, it does feel like a clock for the global north. Yes.
Okay.
More or less. Yeah.
Just as long as we're clear.
Well, I think that's important, and I think you're right to question it. It's not something that we should just take at face value, because there are a lot of like you said, it can be very subjective.
Because climate change is impacting a lot of countries, both because of what their climate was, the extremes they already lived in, it just got exacerbated, and two, they don't have the resources, whether it's technology or funding or what have you, to cope with what they're experiencing. Exactly, and so their doomsday clock probably hit a decade ago. Like,
absolutely right. Yeah, you look at a place like Sri Lanka, for instance, and the unprecedented flooding and the death toll that occurs as a result of that. Yeah, you're right. I mean, some people are already living in a doomsday. So you were completely right about that.
Well, that's nice. It's nice to be told that you're right. But
about that, not that the clock's not important, but about that, you are right. And NASA. About that and NASA.
Fair enough. All right. Well, it's not that I don't. It's an interesting commentary. I just don't know how much. I don't know the right word. I was going to say value or stock, but I don't know if that's what it is. I just don't know what I'm putting into
you're
it.
Saying how much credence do we give to it? Like, is it just a sensationalist stunt that it gets to get moved every now and then?
And what made me think of that is the difference in the way that the clock is being used recently. I mean, either things have just gotten on a micro scale that much worse, where you have all these little data points instead of the big chunky data points in the past.
Yeah. I
don't know if the world has really become that much more complicated, and maybe it has, where you have all these things happening that are just ramping up, and maybe we are just hitting this collapse. Maybe that's right. Maybe the data's there, and that's what it's.
Well, I mean, I think you had two main players. I mean, I feel like on the back of the Cold War, you only had two real adversaries that were capable of bringing doom to the world. So it was a simpler time.
Well, in terms of what's reported and what's recorded in history that you learn, I mean, there was a world outside of Russia and the U.S., and I'm sure times were good and bad for various.
Yeah, but I'm just saying. But as far as those who had nuclear capability, long range missiles to use it, there were only two main nations at the time, more or less. So it makes sense. I'm just saying it was simpler when you look at it from that angle. The world has always been complicated, no doubt about that. But in terms of world-ending power, you had two big players. Now we have a myriad. So of course you're going to get smaller ticks, because the politics have gotten that much more. They're more precise and more convoluted because of that. Almost any global power can end the world if they chose to.
It made me think of Bush's color scale threat level.
Oh God, really? Okay. 9/11 threat levels?
Yeah, sure. That's what it reminded me of. Well, because
I don't want to disparage the scientists in that way.
I would almost feel more comfortable if we had
with clocks, a red alert?
If we had clocks for each, multiple clocks for different areas, a climate change clock, a nuke clock.
I feel like it would get very depressing very quickly, because the climate change clock would have probably already hit midnight, and we're all going about our lives. If anything, it would hasten doom, because clocks would start hitting midnight, and everyone would just be like, all right, well, I'm still got to take the trash out, still got to go to work in the morning, got to take the kids to soccer practice. I don't know, 4 out of the 5 clocks, and that's what it would become. The story would become how many of the clocks have hit midnight. It would be, only 4 out of the 5 clocks. But then it's
we're
all right.
Then it's almost like the Terminator line going across the earth, where you have all these clocks tracking the major issues that are catastrophic. And once they hit midnight, they go dark. And eventually, if they all hit midnight, the world is in darkness.
Yeah. But again, it would all be about how many of those clocks exist. And then you would complain because they started adding a few clocks in 60 years. You're like, in the beginning, there were only 10. Now we've got 32 clocks. And I'm like, well, Jamie, the world's gotten a little bit more complicated. You need a clock for this, you need a clock for that. You'd have the same complaint.
But they're never they don't ratchet it down enough to compensate. I feel
they're saying that it's never, but I feel like the world
down.
That's what they're saying.
Well, it has, if you look at the chart that I looked at, but it not enough for it to leave enough room. I guess maybe sort of my issue is, now that we're talking about this out loud too, do you think the world adapts / becomes comfortable with a certain level of despair,
Yes,
where it's not so close to doom anymore? So even if things don't get better, now climate change is a different thing, but even if things don't get better, they become less dangerous because we just learn to compartmentalize and go about our day, and it just is what it is.
look at the gun issue. if you want the answer to that,
Well, because doom sounds subjective. Because I say climate change is different because climate change can end us literally, at least most of us. But a lot of the other things are subjective dooms. I mean, nukes clearly aren't, but unless those are really the only two things that are being tracked. It's like world-ending nuke or climate change, and nukes would have to be all-out war between powers that are willing to destroy the Earth. I'm
just saying, I think that we as a species are great habitualizers. We can habituate to the most uncomfortable of. We're the frog in the pot. We can boil we can sit until we die. We can boil slowly, essentially, is what I'm trying to say. So yes, I do believe that we can we could feel that we could try to weather a storm despite things consistently getting worse. And I use guns because I'm saying that we as an America, especially in America, by the way, for any of our international listeners, but you are all I think more aware than most Americans. The mass shooting phenomenon gets more and more frequent every year. We don't move on it. We habitualize it. We start to pull it as part of just a consequence of our freedom. The
cost of being free, or something, right?
Exactly. The language, the marketing of those powers of interest, and everyone just adopts it slowly and just sort of sits in the pot and says,
unless that doesn't contribute to the doomsday clock, unless the mass shootings don't contribute to doomsday clocks.
Well, I don't know if they do or not. I've never read an article about the doomsday clock that incorporated that aspect of our society, but I'm throwing it out there as an answer to your question about how we habituate and how we can sit.
So. Yeah. So, I mean, maybe I need to learn more about the doomsday clock. But
yeah, you should check it out. Everyone should check out the doomsday clock by the bulletin.
The government should make it a mandated screensaver.
It will lose again, just like anything else. If you see it every day, it will just start to lose meaning. It will just be another thing in your face. So anyway, with that was a spicy episode. Jamie, where can they find us?
Folks, if you're still here, first, thanks for staying the whole time.
Yeah.
Appreciate that. Appreciate you staying. But now that you're here, lend me your ear. Don't forget, we have new YouTube content every week. Please show us that you care. Engage with us on Twitter @Retraction Media. And you can listen to full episodes on Apple, Spotify, Google, Amazon, and more.
And with that, tick-tock, tick-tock, tick-tock. Retraction out.